This is a video about the trouble codes P0171 or P0174. These are indicating a lean condition of the engine operating on too much oxygen or not enough fuel. So there's excess oxygen in the exhaust as measured by what we call the upstream oxygen sensor or sensors. The code P0171 is for bank 1. If you have a V engine, there would also be a bank 2, and that would be the P0174. There are some inline engines, like I know BMW makes a 6-cylinder that also theoretically has 2 banks, although all the cylinders are in a row. They have different manifolds for cylinders 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, and those each have their own oxygen sensors, so there are 2 banks theoretically in that case. But usually we're talking about bank 1, especially like with a 4-cylinder engine. It's only going to have 1 bank. And so these codes indicate there's either too much air getting in or there's not enough fuel getting in. Usually it's the former. Too much air is getting in. There could be a leak in the intake. And generally that is the case. And this, if that is the case, it's fairly easy to fix. This is a do-it-yourself in most cases for even someone that's not a mechanic, as long as you can find where the leak is and make the repairs. In the case, there's more difficult cases where, for example, let's say one of the injectors is not working, the fuel injectors. So if one of the fuel injectors doesn't work, probably you're also going to get another code like a P0301 or a P0302. Whichever injector is not working, it's going to be P030X, where X is the cylinder where the injector is not working. So if the injector doesn't allow fuel in, you're going to have air in that cylinder. You're not going to have detonation or even burning any fuel in that cylinder, so it's going to misfire, is what we say, and you'll get at least 2 codes in that case. And if you want to know how to find codes, that's a whole different thing. You need a scanner, and I can make something on that, but that's really easy to find on the internet, how to use the scanner. Or you can just go get a scanner from or get a free scan from your auto parts store like AutoZone and O'Reilly's. They do free scans. But make sure you write down the trouble codes that they give you. So getting back to the misfire, that's more difficult to diagnose, but I'll get to that later. But let's go to the first case where too much air is getting in, probably because you have a leak somewhere in the intake. So I'm going to reverse the camera here and look at a 4-cylinder engine. If I can get this camera to reverse. Here is a Ford 4-cylinder engine, 2011 Fiesta, and the intake is here. Under here is the air filter, and you see something like this on your car. Right after the filter, that's going to be the airflow meter. You see it has a cable connected here. This one I think also has the air temperature, inlet temperature thermistor, or whatever it is that measures that, thermometer. And then, well, after that you see a hose coming in, so it's already measured the air and it's calculating how much fuel it needs to put in through the injectors. The injectors are here, and so it's doing that based on the air coming through this meter. It's calculating the amount of fuel. Now if more air comes in after this meter, like from here, there might be a little bit, but there shouldn't be a lot. It's already accounted for that. If there's a rip in this rubber, in this piece of plastic here, that's going to let too much air in, and that's going to cause your 171 code right away. But it could be something simpler. If you look at this going back here, this actually goes down to, and you probably can't see it, but that's the brake booster for the power brakes. So the power brakes use vacuum taken from the intake manifold. The intake manifold is here. That's connected down there. If that hose is broken, well, first of all, your brakes won't work very well, and you'll know that. That's probably why you're getting a 171 code, is you have this hose is busted somewhere along the way to the brake. So a leak in this area of the intake, or something, a big hose connected to the intake manifold, are a couple of things that can cause that code. Another one is this, believe this is the purge line. That can cause a lean condition, but it's less likely. This would have to be broken, and the purge valve would have to be open. Sometimes the purge valve is not down on the engine where it is in this case, but it's further back. So if you had an open line just flapping in the breeze here, that could cause. And so check everything that's connected carefully. And then the other cause that happens very frequently is a leak in the gaskets of the intake manifold where it connects to the engine. So those gaskets are under here. The air goes in this way, and then the injectors squirt gas in there, and it mixes up in here, and then it goes into the engine. But if these gaskets here, there's a lot of vacuum inside the engine, because it's, especially when the throttle is mostly closed, it's trying to suck air in past the throttle, and if there's another place for air to come in, it's gonna want to go in. So if these gaskets under here are bad, that can cause the lean condition. And the way to check those visibly, it's really difficult in this car. In other cars it may be easier, but it's never really easy to find gasket leaking on an intake manifold. But what I do is, if I get down to that point where I haven't found it anywhere else, I will spray carburetor cleaner around the gaskets with the engine running. So with the engine running, I spray, 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 and if the engine speed doesn't change at all, then I know I don't have a leak. But if spraying in one particular location causes the engine speed to increase suddenly while it's idling, I know that I probably have a leak there, because it's sucking air and now it's sucking gas, or it's sucking the solvent that I used, and that solvent is going to cause the engine to speed up. So that's those are ways of finding leaks where air is getting into the engine. Let's look for a moment just at a V8 engine, just so you can see the difference. If you have a V8, this one has two fuel rails. It has a set of 4 injectors on this side and then 4 more injectors on this side. The gaskets here, I think there might be 2 sets of gaskets, but the intake manifold gaskets are down there, and you would spray all along at the bottom of the gaskets if you're checking for that. Here again you have a mass flow sensor right here, so if any of this rubber had a leak in it, that would cause a lean code. This is the PVC valve. If that was ripped open and loose, that would cause a lean code, because see, anything connected like this to the intake manifold that's leaking is going to cause that code. There are some other things connected underneath. This is a fuel line crossing. But yeah, so this, I'm not sure what this is. Looks like maybe a little PVC type arrangement. So anything like that, it's downstream again of where the flow has already been measured, and now if you get more air coming in here, it's going to throw the wrong amount of fuel through the injector. So that's a V8. Now let's talk about if one of your injectors isn't firing properly. Let's say it's this one. This happens to be cylinder number 1 on a Ford. It's the front right or front left as you look at the front of the car. So if this injector wasn't firing, I would get a P0301 code, and I would probably also get a P0171 code, because it's getting air in here, but it's not getting any fuel because the injector's broken. And then that air is going in and being measured. That extra oxygen is being measured down at the oxygen sensor. Can't see it, it's down the bottom of the manifold. And so there's too much oxygen. That's fairly easy to diagnose. What you're gonna want to do though is probably take up this fuel rail, and what I do is I have someone crank the engine just 1 rotation or so that I can see all the injectors firing, and I would compare what I see, how much fuel comes out of each one, and if they're all the same, then they're all good. But if this one is putting out much less than these others, then I would replace this, or at least clean this injector and see if I can get it to work like the rest. It could also be the wiring to the injector. If it's not working at all, this wire may be busted somewhere. One wire goes to the computer and the other one gets power typically. So those are things to check for in case of the code P0171, or in this case you have an 8-cylinder and this is bank 2, and if there was a problem with this bank, like a busted injector, you would get a P0174 lean condition on bank 2. And that could also be called, if there's not a misfire and all these injectors are working, it could be caused by, say, a leak in this gasket, in the intake gasket down here on this side. So that would be a bank 2 oxygen leak. If the leak, the air is getting in way up here, it's going to equally affect both banks, and then you will get both the P0171 and the P0174. But if you have a 2-bank engine like this V8 or V6, and you're getting the P0 and you're not getting both codes, you're only getting the P0171 or the P0174, that means it's a localized leak and not a globalized leak that you have. And so you're going to be looking more along the bank for the leak than you are up in front of the engine. Okay, and post questions if you have them. I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you. This is a short postscript on the discussion about having a lean condition, say on bank 1, that would be P0171. If you also had a misfire and you had pulled up the fuel rail here and gone through the exercise of having someone crank the engine, and you watch the injectors and you identify that one of the injectors is not working, you still need to determine whether that problem is caused by the wiring or by the injector itself. And a quick way to check that is to say unplug the bad injector and an adjacent injector. Like in this case, I've plugged number 1, unplugged number 1 and number 2, and I have the fuel rail up. I haven't done that here, but I would have the fuel rail up to do this diagnosis, and I would say this injector wasn't working. I would try to stretch this connector over to that injector and then have my assistant crank the engine again to see if this wire works to make that injector work. And if it does, another way to do it, if you can't stretch the wire, you can just remove the injector from the rail, and well, in that case you'd have to swap it with another injector. You could swap 2 injectors, put them both back in the rail, and then reconnect the connectors like so, and then and with the fuel rail still up, have your assistant crank the engine and see if the injector works when it's connected to a different cylinder. Then the injector's fine, and the problem was the wiring in the first cylinder, and you're going to have to find that broken wiring. It's possible that it could be the computer itself not sending the pulse, but that would be very unusual. Usually it's going to be a broken wire somewhere. It's either not getting power or it's not getting the signal from the computer. So trace those wires back in that case and find the broken wire. That's all. Thank you.